What if the resurrection of Jesus was not a miracle that broke the laws of nature, but the ultimate demonstration of mastering them? What if the man from Nazareth had reached a level of spiritual development so advanced, so complete, that death itself became a doorway he could choose to walk through and return from? Today, we are going to explore that question, not through the lens of blind faith and not through the lens of skepticism, but through the lens of something far older than Christianity itself, the esoteric science of consciousness, and what happens when a human being ascends to the highest levels of spiritual power. Let us begin at the beginning. There are approximately 18 years of the life of Jesus that are completely missing from the canonical Gospels. From the age of 12 to the age of 30, we have almost nothing. No detailed records, no clear narrative, no explanation. These are known in esoteric and historical circles as the lost years, and what many researchers, mystics, and alternative historians suggest is that these years were anything but empty. According to ancient texts, legends, and oral traditions preserved outside the authority of the early church, Jesus spent these years as an initiate, not as a passive observer, but as a seeker, moving through the hidden centers of knowledge that existed across the ancient world. He is said to have studied with the Essenes, a disciplined and secretive Jewish community living in the deserts of Judea, keepers of purification practices, inner discipline, and sacred teachings that were not shared with the masses. From there, the traditions say, he traveled east into lands where spiritual science had already been refined for thousands of years. There are accounts of a teacher from the West studying in India, learning from Vedic sages who understood consciousness as the foundation of reality. There are stories placing him in Himalayan monasteries among Buddhist practitioners who had mapped the inner world with extraordinary precision. Some traditions suggest he spent time in Egypt, where the mystery schools preserved knowledge of the soul, the afterlife, and the transformation of consciousness. And even accounts that place him among the Druids of ancient Britain, learning from those who were deeply connected to cycles of nature and unseen dimensions of existence. Whether one takes these accounts literally, symbolically, or cautiously, they all point to the same possibility, that these years were a period of intense training, a preparation, a transformation, because every one of these traditions shared a common understanding. The human being is not merely a body. Consciousness is not produced by the brain, it is primary. And reality itself is far more fluid than it appears. They taught that through discipline, through meditation, through inner purification, a human being could transcend the apparent limits of matter, time, and death. Now, let us go deeper. Let us talk about Siddhis. In Sanskrit, the word siddhi means accomplishment or perfection. In both Hindu and Buddhist traditions, Siddhis are described as extraordinary abilities that arise naturally as consciousness expands beyond its ordinary boundaries. They are not considered miracles. They are not supernatural in the sense of breaking reality. They are expressions of a deeper layer of reality itself. The ancient texts describe them with surprising clarity, almost like a structured system. At the beginning, as the mind becomes still and perception sharpens, the practitioner begins to notice changes. Heightened intuition, the ability to sense emotions or thoughts, clairvoyance, perceiving events beyond normal sensory range, healing through touch or focused intention. These are considered early signs. But as consciousness continues to expand, the abilities become far more profound. The body itself begins to respond differently. There are descriptions of practitioners who can become invisible, not by disappearing physically, but by stepping outside the field of perception that ordinary minds operate within. Accounts of levitation, of bodies becoming light, no longer fully bound by gravity. The slowing, or near stopping, of biological processes. The ability to appear in more than one place. To perceive time not as a linear sequence, but as a unified field where past, present, and future are accessible. To pass through solid matter, to interact with reality at a level deeper than physical structure. And at the highest level, the complete transformation, a state where the distinction between matter and consciousness no longer exists. A state where the individual is no longer separate from the fabric of existence. Now, return to the gospel accounts. Look again, carefully. Jesus walks on water. He heals with touch, with words, with intention. He knows what people are thinking before they speak. After the crucifixion, he appears in closed rooms. He is seen, then suddenly gone. Recognizable, yet transformed. Physical, yet not bound by physical laws. This is not random. It is a pattern, a consistent expression of a consciousness operating at a different level. Now consider the idea of the spiritual body. A body that is not limited by decay, not subject to entropy, not bound to time in the same way. A body that can interact with the physical world, yet is not confined to it. A body that can appear and disappear, that can be touched, yet exists. This concept appears again and again across traditions. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is the rainbow body, where advanced practitioners, at the moment of death, do not decay, but dissolve into light. Witnesses describe the body shrinking, radiance appearing, until nothing remains but traces. In yogic traditions, there are accounts of masters whose bodies do not decompose. In ancient Egypt, the soul was understood as something that could move independently of the physical form. Different cultures, different language, same underlying structure. Now, consider something deeper. What if the death of Jesus was not something that happened to him, but something he consciously entered? What if it was chosen? What if the crucifixion was not merely suffering, but an initiation? And what if The 3 days were not death in the ordinary sense, but a profound withdrawal of consciousness into its source, followed by a deliberate return. Then the resurrection is no longer a violation of nature. It becomes a revelation of a deeper level of nature, a demonstration that consciousness is not bound to the body. Now, bring this back to the present moment, because this is not just a story about one individual. Every tradition we have mentioned agrees on one point. This potential exists within every human being, not as a belief, but as a capacity. The path begins simply with stillness, with awareness of the breath, with observing the movement of thought without becoming it, because a restless mind cannot perceive subtle reality, but a still mind becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, something deeper begins to appear. Awareness expands. Energy becomes perceptible. The sense of self begins to loosen. And gradually, the relationship between consciousness and the body begins to change. The body becomes more responsive. Healing accelerates. Perception deepens. And beyond a certain point, the identity that once felt solid begins to dissolve. This is where real transformation begins, not in belief, not in theory, but in direct experience. The message hidden in all of this is simple. You are not limited to the surface of what you are. The body is not a prison. Consciousness is not confined. And death is not the end. What was demonstrated was not meant to be worshipped, but understood. The real question is not, did a man rise from the dead? The real question is, are you willing to consider that the boundary between life and death is far thinner than you were taught? And more importantly, are you willing to go inward, deep enough to discover what lies beyond it? Because the path does not begin in a temple or in a monastery. It begins in the silence between your thoughts, in the breath you are taking right now. And it continues as far as you are willing to go. And it has no end.